Welcome back to Twin Chat. We are excited you are here as we have real conversations with real people focusing on well being. Hi, I'm Kenan McCumber, mom of two and teacher living in Bend, Oregon.
And hi, it's Steph Kapori here, mom of three, and I'm a life coach living in sunny Hawaii. And today we have our special guest, Ann Moon, and we're thrilled to have her with us here today. Hi, Ann.
Hi, thank you.
So, Ann and I first met in college and we became fast friends. And then we studied abroad together in Europe, and we have continued our deep friendship into adulthood. Anne started her career as a photographer and then a baker and a stay-at-home mom raising three beautiful children. And now she's an entrepreneur. Her business is called Beautifully Gluten-Free. Anne is here to talk to us about her journey with a child who has a celiac diagnosis and how she has had to adapt her lifestyle and how this led to the path of her starting her own business to help others.
And we are so excited to have you here. And I just want you to know how grateful I am that I call you my friend as well. I am so blessed to have been interwoven into Stephanie's close college group of friends. So thank you.
And I have one thing to add. So we have always called Anne Barbo. So there will be times during this podcast that Kenan and I will be calling her Barbo because Anne is like a foreign name to us. So we welcome Anne Barbo Moon, and it's her maiden name and also her middle name now that Moon is her married name. So
thank you, Steph, for clarifying that for everybody because I knew we would slip into that as soon as this started. Barbara, we would love for you to start with a quick twin story before we launch into our discussion.
Perfect. First off, though, I'm really excited to be here. You guys are so awesome. I love that you're doing this podcast. It's so fun. You guys are really funny.
And we are, right?
And have a lot of good things to share. So it's really fun. I've been listening to the first two, and I'm so excited to be here. It's really fun. Okay, so my twin story is a very twin story. Way back when, freshman year of college, when you were on the third floor, Steph, I remember the first time Kenan came to visit. I don't think we knew she was coming at all.
No, we didn't tell anyone.
No, but so I walk into your room and I start talking to you and about whatever, we're going to go out or do something. And then all of a sudden you, Steph, jump out of the closet. And I had been talking to Kenan the whole time and didn't know it. It's a very twin story, but you guys can do that. At the same time now, I can't imagine not being able to tell you guys apart.
Well, it's so funny, Barbo, because Kenan and I have been told this our whole life. Sometimes people say we're the most identical twins they've ever met. And sometimes people have said, what, you're twins? So it's very interesting, different people's perspectives. And I feel like it's really once you get to know us. So when we were younger, like little, like 5 or whatever, our grandfather would get a piece of masking tape and write our names on it and stick it.
Really?
Yes. And I, when we were 5, we knew our grandfather, of course, but he didn't, you don't really get to know someone at that age. Because it takes a lot of learning their mannerisms and their speech and their, and just, kind of who they are and how they talk too.
Yeah. Well, and grandparents, they're,
different generation.
Well, and didn't your mom dress you guys up in the same clothes?
So you know what, Barbo, she only for special photographs, but when we were infants, she put one of us in solid color and then one of us in like stripes or patterns so that she could easily identify us because we were so identical. And even in the photo albums, Steph and I love going through the photo albums with our own children now, but all of the pictures, she was so organized. She labeled them as soon as she put them in the album with our names because she knew she would not remember. And we were so similar. And in fact, there's times now if by chance there isn't a name, we'll look at it and be like, wait, who's who in that picture?
Yeah, because sometimes, I think there were some that she said, oh, I'm not going to label this. I'll always know who my babies are. And
Right.
so she's like, we're like, Mom, which one, who am I? And she's like, I don't remember.
But Barbo, I love the story that you told because especially now in adulthood, Stephanie living in Hawaii and me in Bend, there's people who don't necessarily know our history of being identical twins. And so when she'll come to visit or vice versa, there is that element of people like, what? Oh my gosh, you have a twin? And it's like a double take. And then of course, then questions start to come out with all of that.
Yeah.
But
But
let's launch into Barbo's.
let's launch in. Yes, let's launch in. So Barbara, I want to start at the beginning with you because I've been on this journey with you since we've been friends for 30 years. So let's, I remember you telling me about visiting the doctor when Charlie was about 1.5 with a chronic ear infection. Is that right?
Yeah, she was in and out, either for a diagnosis of an ear infection or a checkup, and then another double ear infection. And she spent like probably 3 months just mostly on some sort of antibiotic to deal with these ear infections. They just,
Poor baby
yeah.
at 1.5, right? And you told me that Charlie's abdomen was becoming distended, and her poop was a ashy white color. And tell us what that was like.
Well, it was scary and overwhelming. She was my first, right? I got 1.5. I was a new mom. I didn't know what any of this was, but I knew that that wasn't right because I know that babies, kids' poop can be lots of colors, as you know. But I knew that the white wasn't a good one, and so I was just like, I was in the doctor's office so much that I just brought in a diaper, and I was like, "What is this? What like this can't be good." So tell me what to do and figure it out. And the first thing she looked at, we had to get a blood draw because the doctor was like, well, maybe it's her liver not functioning. So that was the first idea. And I was like, oh goodness. But luckily that blood test came back totally fine. And she didn't know what else to look at. So she was smart enough, our pediatrician, she was smart enough to call. In Seattle, we've got Seattle Children's Hospital, and they have a GI department there. And so she called, and the doctor, his name happened to be Dr. Burpee, which I think is funny for a GI doctor. But he was great. So over the phone, she described Charlie's symptoms and, just overall demeanor and her physical shape and all that. And he said, well, let's test for celiac disease. He's like 95% just over the phone diagnostic or description. She was like,
Barbara, did you even know what celiac was?
you know what's funny? I did barely, because ironically, the summer after she was born, I read this book called The Gluten-Free Girl, and I was she was like 3 months old, and I'm reading this book, and I'm like, wow, something about the books rang true to me. I was like, oh, maybe this is why my digestion stuff was an issue. Like, this gluten thing makes sense to me, and how food can heal and food can hurt and all that. And so, yeah, I had barely known about it from this book. And so, yeah, but I didn't think it would ever be on my doorstep and in my child and affect us so dramatically. I mean, so yeah, the doctor suggested we do another blood draw, and her numbers were off the charts.
Wow. So what was the first step after you found out? You go home with this diagnosis. What happens next?
Well, it's funny because the diagnostic process is on one hand really easy because it starts with a blood draw, super easy. I don't know why doctors don't look for it sooner because it's such an easy blood draw. That is the first step, and then to totally confirm and just to see the damage of the small intestines, they do an endoscopy and take a biopsy of your small intestines, and the villi. The in the small intestines, it's lined with these villi, right, to help with absorption of nutrients, right?
Okay.
And so when you have celiac disease, they're blunted, so the lining of the small intestines flattens out, so they can actually see it. And so you get the biopsy, and it either is confirmed or not. And so we have photos of her esophagus and small intestines in her baby book, and they confirmed it was celiac disease. The issue and the really challenging part for me as a mom was, and this is like, it just gets to me because, you want to take care of your babies, but I had to keep feeding her gluten products between the blood draw and the scope, because the only way to get an accurate diagnosis is to keep eating the gluten. Because once you remove gluten from your diet, your body starts to heal and you can't see it anymore. So for like 3 weeks, I had to force feed her cookies and gluten. And she was self-selecting already at 1.5 to not eat food. So I had to, like, she didn't even want my cookies.
Wow. What child doesn't want your cookies? They're amazing.
I know. And I actually have a picture of her choosing broccoli over a cookie.
Wow.
Wow.
So then, Barbara, tell us kind of, okay, you get the diagnosis, and then what? I mean, this is life altering, and you're used to, you have a normal kitchen, normal life. What now?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. We had to overhaul everything because, she was only so little. And so we decided to have our whole house be gluten-free. And it was overwhelming. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I knew how to cook and everything, but I didn't know how to do all of that gluten-free. I was like, what is gluten? Where is it? It's and everything. And I didn't know how extensive it is and where it all is. And so I had to learn. It was really overwhelming. And I felt really alone in the process. And it was hard enough just to know how to be a mom and then to know how to keep her safe. And, I don't, it was hard. It's blurry when I look back at it. It's like a very visceral feeling that I remember.
Yes.
But, having to go to the grocery store, it was like a research and development,
Well,
thing.
and I imagine Barbo too, she's 1.5. You can kind of control her diet at that age. And then we fast forward as she becomes a toddler and you're at, then she goes to
Birthday
school.
parties.
Tell us about that. Tell us about that journey and what you've had to do and to keep your child safe. And what,
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes people will look at me as if I'm some crazy person because I'm like, you know, get the gluten away from her. Like if we're at a pizza party or something and I bring her food and then she's sitting next to somebody and they're passing pizza over her plate, I get this look on my face like, oh my God, please just don't drop. Because for her reaction is so severe. It takes, like, well, for any celiac person or person who has celiac disease, it takes very, very, very little to cause any damage internally. Some people have severe reactions and some people are asymptomatic. She has severe reaction. So, and it's very traumatizing. So even with a cross contact situation where it's like a gluten-free muffin is made in a shared situation and it gets a little bit of contact with other, they have gluten on the pan or whatever, within the next 3 hours, she'll be throwing up for a little bit. If she actually eats it straight, like a bite of pizza, within 20 minutes, she's throwing up for like 4 hours.
Oh.
And it's just like, it's devastating. It's traumatic for her. I mean, it's, so
I remember you saying that she said, "Mommy, like I don't want to be in these I don't want to be in like in these situations like at a birthday party because she's so afraid," right?
right. Well, and then she's kind of a different person, right? You know, she brings her own food. I remember she had dinner a couple years ago. She had dinner at her friend's house. She went change schools. She has a new friend. They invited her to have dinner at their house, and they were really thoughtful about trying to make gluten-free food for her. But it's like out of their kitchen, and since it takes such a little amount to have her get sick, we don't trust anything out of a shared kitchen. That it's just not safe for her. So, I pack up and I asked the mom what she was making for dinner. And so I recreated it in our kitchen and just sent her to her friend's house with her own gluten-free version of Korean short ribs. It was the first time I made those. They were good.
Wow. that takes a lot of time. That's really, really thoughtful, really thoughtful. And it makes her feel included, that she's not different.
Right.
And while you're talking about this, Barbo, I was thinking about, this is 10 years ago, right? And
Almost 11.
almost 11 years ago, there weren't as many gluten-free options. You couldn't go down the aisle and just get pre-made stuff and put that in your cart. And Stephanie and I, as you know, are gluten-free because we have Hashimoto's disease. And so, but for us, if we have any gluten, it's a little stomach ache for 24 hours. It's not severe. And we're talking on this end, there's a spectrum, as you mentioned, right? But you're on this end here that is, you have to think of everything again. Like I remember hearing about you traveling and what that is like. That was mind blowing for me, because we take for granted being able to go to a hotel or go to a condo and just use what's there.
Right. I have a to-go kitchen.
Amazing. What is that?
Tell us about that.
It's fun. I mean, we don't travel lightly anymore. I mean, when we pack, I went to REI and got like camping cookware so the pots that nest and handles that come off and all that stuff. So it's easy to, pack. But then I include, a cutting board and a sponge to clean with, and let's see what else, a strainer, steamer, but there's silicone ones that are collapsible. So, I basically take all the things that I need that can't be either washed in a dishwasher or are plastic or wood, right? Like cutting boards, we can't use anyone else's cutting boards because gluten is really sticky and it gets in there. Strainers, pasta strainers, even if they can go through the dishwasher, it's not, those little holes hold on to a lot. So yeah, silverware and dishes that can go through the dishwasher, those are fine. We will use those. But when we travel, we definitely use Airbnb and apartments and condos with kitchens, because then we go shopping, because we don't want to have to go out every meal, because that just increases the chance that she'll get sick, because it's hard for restaurants sometimes to be able to cook safely.
And Barbo, tell us about the reaction of friends and family. And I ask this question because is a broader thing to our audience who may be listening, who have maybe don't relate on the celiac, but who relate because they've their children have something, or they have something that categorizes them as different, not normal, and what's been the reaction for people close around you?
Well, we're lucky. I mean, celiac disease, it is an autoimmune genetic disease. So first and foremost, if somebody has it in the family, then everyone else in the family needs to get tested, because there's a higher chance that somebody else has it because it's genetic. Mm-hmm. And there's more than 200 different symptoms of it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it isn't even intestinal, like GI issues. There's brain fog, fatigue, joint pain, failure to thrive, and infertility issues, and all these things that aren't gut related. So, if somebody gets a celiac diagnosis, everyone in the family should just get tested just to see, because there's always a chance. But it's hard when food is your medicine. It's really triggering for people, because like even the most well-intentioned family members are like, well, I made this for you. Just can you just have a bite, please? I made it for you, and it's gluten-free, I promise. And it's like, no, it's not. You don't know, and you feel bad, and it puts a weight on, like I've had to see Charlie step up with adults as a young child saying no thank you, and having to repeat no thank you, I can't have that. And it's like, that's a lot to put on a young person. It's hard enough as an adult to say, no, thank you, I don't want to eat that. That'll make me sick. I mean, people don't understand. It's triggering. So it's really hard. The support of family and friends is so crucial. And yet it's also so hard to come by sometimes. It's really upsetting for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what's interesting to me, the question when I asked, and I put it in quotes, right? You don't feel normal. You feel quote unquote different. And a dear friend of mine just gave a talk on what normal and actually it's extraordinary, right? She said, like, we shift that word from the word normal or abnormal or different, and shift it to the word extraordinary, and how that actually changes the whole meaning of it. so you don't feel like something's wrong with you,
Right.
right? So she is extraordinary. She has things that she has to be cognizant of. That's a lot for a young, she's 12 now, right, Barbo?
Yeah, almost 13.
She's almost 13. So she's had to deal with this her whole life, having to empower herself to say no and to learn that at a young age because it's her health and her safety. And I love seeing it through the lens of extraordinary. And when
Well,
I
it's
say
great.
that, yeah, go ahead.
Well, what you say is actually so important. One of the things that she's learned is who she can trust and who she can value, right? If somebody's not willing to support her health, then that's a huge red flag, right? It's like she's learned this lesson at such an early age to be like, oh, these are my boundaries. If people aren't okay with it, then you know what? Maybe you should not be part of my world. And, wouldn't we have all loved to learn that lesson, like years ago, to be able to say, you know what? You're not fully supporting me, and yet I'm still interacting with you. It's like, oh wait, no, no, no. It's for her to find a partner in life, it's going to be a huge way for her to weed out the people that aren't good for her. And she's learned that at such an early age, which that is a huge value. And I try to really support her and encourage her to look at the silver lining of all this. I mean, it's hard and it's overwhelming and it causes her to feel excluded sometimes and all sorts of other negative feelings. At the same time, she knows what it's like to feel good in her body. She knows what it's like to feel supported by people. She knows what it's like to have, to be able to share and bring people into her world and be like, this is what is good for me and it tastes good. And, I've cooked for her and she shares her cookies with her friends and all of her friends love them. And so she's been able to create this, fun side of it for herself, which is good. I don't know. It's a lot for her.
Yeah, and Barbo, I think about, you touched so much upon Charlie and her development as this, almost teenager. Wow. Talk about resilience right there and this life lessons that she's learning at such a young age. And I wanted to really make sure that we also talked about today your business. And, of course, we understand that this path took you, right, Charlie's journey to begin this business of launching gluten free. And could you tell us about those steps?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, because that the support thing is the key piece for me, right? Like when we first got diagnosed, or she got diagnosed, we were alone in this process. We walked out of the doctor's office with a handout about what gluten was and where it was, and that was pretty much it, a photocopied piece of paper. And then so we get home and I'm like, what do I do with this? I have no idea. I didn't know anyone who had it. I didn't know anyone who was living gluten-free, in person. So the lack of support was huge. And so what I see now is that there is a huge need for not just the doctor support, because you get the diagnosis and then you leave the doctor's office, and some nutritionists will help you out too. But a lot of them don't even understand the ins and outs of what it takes to really thrive with a strict gluten-free diet, because it's not just food, it's personal care products, it's makeup, it's some medications, it's everywhere. It's in, food and non-food products. So my goal is to really help people make the transition and not feel alone and isolated and overwhelmed. I want them to feel supported and that they're not alone. And that also, like at the grocery store, there's a lot of bad, expensive gluten-free food. And if I can help everyone just get to the good gluten-free food options that fit their life, if they're a vegetarian or if they love, meat or pasta or pizza, how do you get to really thriving gluten-free faster and having that support? And sometimes you have a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions and you kind of feel crazy and like no one gets you. And I just want them to feel like I get them and I understand, and that no question's crazy. And, I just want people to feel supported in the process.
And Barbo, tell us about the process. So I call you and I find you on Instagram or your website. Tell us what do you do for us?
Well, first off is because I'm not for everyone. If you have severe, nutrition deficiencies or things like that, a nutritionist is probably going to be better suited for you. What I can do though is you can schedule a 20-minute informational call with me. And if it's you having wanting support with how to transform your kitchen, how to navigate the grocery store, how to navigate speaking with schools or teachers and extended family, and how the lifestyle of gluten-free works, I'm here for you. And so I can personalize our 1 to 2, 3 sessions depending on your needs, because some topics take more in-depth work. I mean, doing the kitchen, a shared kitchen, a dedicated kitchen that's gluten-free, and there's a certain amount of work that needs to be done. And so anyway, people will give me a call and we find out if I'm the right support, and then we book a few sessions, and then we have some follow-up calls just to make sure, because questions always arise. And then I'm hopefully move on from people because they are then successful on their own and have their own rhythm.
And what it sounds like to me, Barbo, is you bridge that gap from you leave the doctor's office, you have this diagnosis, you're like, holy cow, one, what is celiac? What do I need to do? What are my next steps? And you hold their hand and
Yeah.
you say, you're not alone. I've got you. I've been through this. And you do it in a hands-on approach. And I imagine you also do it right now, via Zoom,
Yeah.
but you can, if you're in the Seattle area, you visit someone's house and you go in and you, because so much of it is about actually like knowing you're not alone and that there are people out there that can relate, and you're such a joyful, honest, happy, caring, generous person that your personality just makes people feel safe. And that safety is I think one of the most important things when you have any kind of diagnosis, that you're feeling different. And back to what I said before, you're feeling different or abnormal, or um, and to transform it into I'm extraordinary, and I have this as an opportunity to now see how I can you know grow and learn from this, and not have it it will define you in certain ways because it's your health and safety, but not define you in a way that is limiting.
Right. I mean, sorry,
I
Kim, go.
was just going to say, Barbo, like that to be heard is so important. And you are that person.
Right.
And you are, to Stephanie's point that she made so beautifully, like you are a listener, you know this, you've been through it, you can empathize. People need to know that there are other channels out there and not just calling the doctor, because you can't get the doctor on the phone. And when these questions arise, what do you do? And I can imagine in your journey, that was hard.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the feeling heard piece that you mentioned, because most people, once they reach a celiac disease diagnosis, they've maybe been trying to go that sorry they have like 6 to 10 years of misdiagnosis or no diagnosis or just not being heard. A lot of people have to fight their doctor just for the blood test. And so once they have it, and then just to be heard and to feel like that you're not alone, and that I just want people to not feel like they have to reinvent the wheel, and they can take what I have, all this information, and start at level here versus down here. And it's just sharing and helping. I mean, and the hardest one I think is when you're a new mom and you're overwhelmed by everything, and your sweet little baby has this, and that on some level you've given it to her, and there's an emotional component that is really hard, and the hand holding and the supporting and really holding space for people is really important, because there's going to be some anger that comes with this too. I mean, I've gotten it from her where it's like, why did you give this to me? You know, and it's like, I didn't mean to. And at the same time, like, I wouldn't take it away from her because, you know, it's not terrible, but there is this emotional component. And yeah, holding space for people is really important. And the medical community, while they have their role, they can't do all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really just an accessory to help support people. You know, celiac disease there's a lot to it, and I don't want people to feel alone in the whole process.
Well, that's all. Thank you, Barbo. Thank you for sharing your story. And we're coming to the close of our session, but I wanted to I wanted to ask you, because as a caregiver, right? You own your own business. You're a mom of 3 beautiful children. What is one thing that you do for yourself for self-care and maintaining your own well-being?
Oh, that's a good question. Self-care, isn't that just always so elusive, right? I mean, when I think about it, it's like, oh gosh, I don't really do anything. But no, I do. I try. So I'm a physical person. I really love to move. So I've got to move. If I sit too long, it's just not good for anybody. So whether that be like a yoga class or a little run or at least a walk, and listening to podcasts are my new favorite. You go for a walk and you plug into a little podcast. So now I've got you guys and a few other that I like to listen to. But yeah.
What other thing, actually, Barbo, that you told me years ago? I don't know if you still do this, but I have taken a note from your book. Is you take baths and you take a glass of wine up to the bath and you close the door. And you did this when your kids were little. I think maybe they'd already gone to bed. It was before dinner, before you and your husband had dinner. And you would close the door and you were, this is my namaste, peaceful time. And I do that sometimes. I think of you, I'm like, oh, thanks, Barbo, for this idea. This is awesome.
I love it. I still do that. I try to do it. It's really funny. I get a lot more visitors though, because no one's going to bed at 5:30 anymore. When they're 12, 9, and 6, and now we have this new puppy. I'm trying to get in the bath. That's the only time I read. But yeah, it's really a nice break between like mom day and mom evening, or even just like a me morning or a day and me in the evening. It's nice to have that kind of separation. It feels luxurious now. It doesn't happen as often as I want it to. But if I could do like running, yoga, and a bath in a day, that would be like a vacation. So if I can get like one of those in, I'm good.
Well,
and I like to bake though too.
Yeah, you are an amazing cook. I have to like that is a passion of yours, and Kenan and I have been the gracious recipients of your cooking on many occasions, and we've enjoyed it every time.
Thank you. It's fun.
So I want to thank you, Barbo. Thank you so much for joining us. And you can find Anne on Instagram at Beautifully Gluten-Free Photos. You can also find her at her website at glutenfree.com. And she has a lot of free resources on there. And so check her out because she's amazing. Pass her on to your friends. And again, I just want to thank our audience for listening to us and joining in to Twin Chat with S&K. And we hope that you will subscribe and to our station on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify, and turn on your notifications. I'm not really sure how this all works, but someone told me it was Kenan's 13-year-old who said, tell people to turn on their notifications so that they actually get a notification that you have a new episode. What was that, Kenan?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. See, same wavelength.
Same wavelength. Yeah. And you can also find Kenan and I on Instagram at Rise Life Coaching. And yeah, thanks again. And take care, everyone. Actually, it's Rise Life Coach. Sorry, I'm new to social media. Okay, till next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. See you next week, everyone.